Here's something that may or may not shock you. More than 45 million Americans are now on a diet. We're not just obsessed with our food, we focus on what our pets eat too. In fact, according to Business Wire, sales of dog and cat food may top $60 billion by 2026. There are dozens of Facebook groups dedicated to fancy food for Fido. Okay, I admit I'm the gal who now buys sweaters for her Chihuahua to keep him warm in winter, so that trend doesn't surprise me. But would it surprise you to know that Iowa pig farmers are just as obsessed with what their animals are eating? Pig nutrition is a thing, a big thing. It affects how a pig develops in the womb, how they gain weight, and how the pork will taste when you buy it at the store. Farmers who embrace this knowledge pay strict attention on improving the diets of their pigs and the environmental footprint of raising those animals. Farmers like Gene Gourley from north central Iowa, a fourth-generation family farmer. His family paved a path of innovation ever since hard times hit the farm in the 80s.
Yep, I actually went back to school when times were tough in the 80s, the farm crisis. My dad asked me to find another career for a period of time until we could afford to have all his kids back. So I actually went back to school, got my master's degree in animal nutrition. So yeah, that's kind of been able to adapt that and use that on the family farm when it was able to come back. Yeah, I mean, things have not changed from the standpoint of, to God's grace, of having corn and soybeans in Iowa as our main base crops, and the pig is very well suited to consume those two main crops that we raise. And so my family raises corn and soybeans, and then we feed that to the pigs, corn being the major ingredient that obviously makes up almost 80% of the diet of what pigs will eat will be the corn that we raise. And then about 10% of their diet is soybeans, or actually soybean meal, which comes from the soybeans that we raise. And then they're processed at various soybean processing facilities. And then we purchase that soybean meal back and feed that to the pigs, and that's about 10% of the diet. And then the other 10% of the diet is basically can be made up of amino acids, the building blocks to protein. And then also we'll feed the vitamins, trace minerals, because those grains are not high in that. So we'll feed the vitamin trace minerals to them that we add. And then some major minerals, calcium, phosphorus, we add to the diets to give them enough of those nutrients to perform and grow at a very efficient rate, or the best efficiency we can.
Now, I do remember from my days of being on the hog farm, and that was pigs will eat anything. I mean, if they got out of the fence, oh my gosh, there they go. They're just eating everything. But that doesn't mean that they should.
They'll pretty well pick whatever tastes good to them. And yes, it's not always what they should eat, but what we want to do is put a balanced diet together for them and make it so that they have the nutrients to grow as lean and efficiently as possible, and yet provide the most nutritious product we can to the consumer is our goal.
Now, to remind people, a pig that's ready to go to market weighs how much, and then how much feed does that one type of pig eat in a day?
Today, we're marking our pigs around 290 to 300 pounds. And they're consuming 6 pounds per day. And the efficiency, though, of that has changed dramatically since I was a kid. The efficiency of the pig we grow today, due to genetics and nutrition both, but we'll be at a 2.6 feed conversion. And I say that so there's 2.6 pounds of the feed they consume to 1 pound of meat that they produce. And so back when I was growing up, that was probably closer to 3.5 to 4 pounds of feed. And so our carbon footprint has actually gone down over the last 60 years by about 35%. So we've lowered our footprint, so to speak. We will have the calories based. When we do a diet formulation, we'll have calories based in that. You're trying to meet the amount of kilocalories that need to be consumed per day. And that's basically coming majority from the corn is our energy source with the starch. And then protein obviously is the next building block, which will be your amino acids that are the building block of that. And again, soybean meal is that main ingredient. But today, part of our efficiency is being able to utilize amino acids, which are produced, some here in Iowa, quite a few here in Iowa, or amino acids are produced, and those are fed to the pigs, and then they utilize those, and then we can lower our excretion of nutrients by feeding these various ingredients. We can actually lower the excretion from the pigs so that the environmental impact that we have from the pigs is reduced, and yet we still have a very valuable nutrient supply to go to the crops, which turns around and raises the corn and the soybeans to be fed back to the pigs. So very sustainable system that we that we have.
It seems like it's certainly, you think of these high school athletes, very elite athletes, and they've got it down to macronutrients. But I have a feeling that can't touch the kind of science you guys are putting together.
It's really similar. Obviously, you're trying to figure out what combination of nutrients are needed to get the best performance, right? Is what the athlete's trying to put together. And a lot of that is protein building blocks, right? For that, to build lean muscle and to keep that muscle efficient and active. And so in the pig, it's really no different. We've done a lot of research, and others have done research to come up with what the pig needs to perform at his healthiest state.
It's very performance goal oriented. It's very precise. And there's a lot of science into it because just like an athlete that has to perform, these pigs, you're trying to keep it, really the best for them, for their growth, for their health, for the muscle content, all that.
Yep. And so, we've got it. The research has shown us we actually have phases that we feed the animals. So it's as they're growing from that younger stage that I mentioned, which is typically in that 50 pounds. When we get them to that stage of what we call a feeder pig to market, we'll adjust the ration about 5 times. And what that means by adjustment is we're lowering the protein because as they get older, they're eating more. And so we can lower the amount of protein they need. Plus, as their age and their growth curve changes, that change of lean to fat amount that they deposit will change. And so we try and match that, and that's the efficiency. So we'll adjust those diets as they get older. Again, adding more corn or starch to the diet and removing the soybean meal as they get older. So it's truly a science, but yet the pig will tell us, and that's where our trials have shown what does the pigs need to perform at their best and healthiest. And we match that as close as we can and provide that on a daily basis.
Right. It's kind of like an athlete having a protein shake. You mix it all together, and it's not just the banana and the yogurt in there. It's all this other stuff,
Yep. All your micronutrients, all your vitamins and trace minerals that we need to sustain ourselves, whether it be our growth rates or our efficiency of what we're trying to exercise and keep lean muscle mass on us is really the same thing we're doing in pigs and trying to keep that most efficient and put that all together in one mixture.
Well, people might have heard that, cows have multiple stomachs, and so they digest things differently, or hopefully they understand that basic. Are pigs that much different than people? Do they digest food differently, need different things?
Yeah, well, the pig is extremely close to a human being as far as a species. It's going to mimic what our stomach, the single stomach person is. And so in cattle can digest a lot more fibers because of those different stomachs. They have the capability to break down those fibers. In a pig with a single stomach, it's a little more difficult to digest fiber, and that's why we feed mostly the cornstarch and the soybean meal that's already processed. But today, the one thing I would say that has changed a lot since I was a kid, today we have enzymes that we can feed to the pigs, and they've been discovered, part of them from cattle stomachs, or the enzyme that they create. And those enzymes help break down various nutrients that the pigs naturally can't do because of their single stomach, but it allows them then by feeding those enzymes in the feed, it'll break down. An example I'll give will be in soybean meal. There's a percentage of phosphorus that's bound in soybean meal that is undigestible to a pig. And by feeding this enzyme, it actually, in the diet, then it gets in their stomach, and with their stomach acids, they can break down that bound phosphorus that's in soybean meal. And so what that allows us to do is then decrease the amount of inorganic phosphorus that we add to the diet. And thus, we actually have a lower excretion of phosphorus to the environment, which then improves our environmental footprint of less excretion to the fields, less runoff, those kind of things. And so that's been a major change. And it's not just phytase is one enzyme. There's multiple other enzymes that are being developed as well as have been developed. And so that's been kind of the exciting transition over time, is the addition of enzymes to diets.
That's amazing. And can you imagine having that conversation with your great-grandfather? Now, we got to talk enzymes. We got to start working that in the diet, and here's why.
Yeah, wouldn't even had a clue about what we were doing there. It would just be about, I know when they need corn, and I know they need some of this soybean meal, let's get it out to them. And however we did that with a scoop shovel or the old grinder mixer pulling around.
That's amazing. What do you think, let me ask you, Gene, is the future of feeding pigs and the types of nutrition they need, what you might see coming around the bend?
Yeah. continually evolving. I do various trials as well, but we're looking at, I think fiber is still going to be a huge issue for us long term. We're going to have to figure out how to feed animals with more fiber, because some of the starches, obviously, as you see, the ethanol industry and some others utilize the starches for other processes, right? And so we'll continue to have fiber that we'll have to figure out how to feed better to pigs. And so the enzymes that I mentioned will continue to be developed. We'll see how it all plays out and how it all develops over time. But I think we have to be ready to alter diets and try and figure out how to feed pigs efficiently and still be environmentally conscious in our footprint, and yet utilize what we can for feed ingredients.
The Audubon Manning Veterinary Clinic, known as AMVC, has 23 veterinarians who specialize in recommending diets and care for more than 40 hog farms around the country. As the 9th largest pork producer in the U.S., it's no surprise that they have a swine nutritionist like Dr. Trey Kellner. He's the food guru for pigs, and you might be surprised to hear what his pigs are eating today.
So my job is to basically, first of all, design the feed program. And what that is basically how a registered nutritionist or a dietitian that you would see at your Hy-Vee, your Fairway, et cetera, describe a diet plan for a kid or someone that's trying to lose weight or, improve their metabolism, et cetera. I do the same thing for pigs across all ages. So whether if they're babies or moms or, finishing pigs, my responsibility is to ensure that their nutritional needs are being met, so that they're able to, first of all, have high quality of life. Second of all, be productive animals, whether they're producing babies or producing pork for us at the time of harvest. And that feed cost is managed as well as possible as well, right? So overseeing the checkbook of the pig owner and the pig producer. So today, just like our grocery bills, it's a big expense, right? So today, about 60% of the cost of raising a pig is just in the feed, right? Kind of similar to our grocery bills and our household budgets, right? It's a big line item. Same with feed for pigs. So my job is to not only oversee, their nutritional needs and their well-being and their productivity, but also kind of manage the checkbook as well.
And that's right, with those rising feed costs and people, they're starting to learn that, okay, so corn, soybeans, that's what makes Iowa efficient as a great place for raising pigs. But it's not just that. There's so much that goes into it. And I suppose since you're feeding them in such a wide area, they have different access to different food products at different places. So how do you manage all that depending on where the people are raising the pigs?
Yeah. So really, it's just math, honestly, right? So every pig and every animal, and humans as well, right? We have certain nutritional requirements. This is how much protein we need, how much energy we need, how much minerals we need, vitamins, et cetera. And each ingredient, whether that be corn or soybean meal or bakery byproduct or distillers, and we can get into that a bit later, has its own set of nutrients contained in that ingredient. Similar if we would eat a cheeseburger or a steak or a salad or have a glass of milk versus water, right? There's different nutrients within our food and within those feed ingredients. And each one of those ingredients then has a cost associated to it. Right. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to maximize cost over gain or cost over feed cost or cost over, each pig space, et cetera. Just like we would try to manage our grocery bill as well. Right. So we're going to buy something that's on sale for $2.99 or buy what we always had for $4.99. Right. As we go through the grocery aisle, very similar to saying, hey, are we going to use corn or are we going to use a different alternative such as bakery byproduct or distillers, et cetera, right? So not to make it too simple, but basically it's just math, right, on how we decide that. And different areas will have different ingredients that are included within the diet or pig food, basically, right, pig feed. So there within Iowa, corn and soybean meal is usually at a great price. That makes sense to include in diets. When we raise pigs, say in North Dakota or Western Canada or the Western United States, You might see more barley or peas or hybrid rye, et cetera, included in those diets, right? Because that's what's grown locally there. And that's what makes sense economically. And so today, about 40% of our diets from about wean to finish is what I call, human waste or something that would be landfilled if it wasn't for livestock production. And as a nutritionist, sometimes I take that for granted, like, oh yeah, we do that every day. Yeah. But as I explain what we actually do and the responsibility that I have and how important I take that, I think that's an important thing to hit on.
Well, yeah, and you think about it, how much food waste humans create. Even going to a sushi restaurant, get edamame, and you only eat the peas, but what about all the shells? And where's the pig when you need it?
Exactly. Yeah, and the best part is pigs are very similar to humans, right, in terms of their anatomy, right? So their digestive system, basically how they eat feed or food, how they digest it, how they absorb it, and how they utilize it is very, very similar to us. So things that occur within food manufacturing for humans that aren't to spec, or it's wrong, or it's mislabeled, or Fruit Loops aren't that bright red, blue, green, purple color that we're used to. They're a little faded. Well, we can use that in livestock feed and pig feed in a great fashion that's not only reducing our carbon footprint, but is helping reduce our cost of production, which therefore, when you see that pork chop on the shelf and bacon in your grocery aisle, et cetera, yeah, that price is definitely increased, but it could be higher without those practices.
Well, you know how consumer tastes evolve and certainly have evolved over time. And, 100 years ago, pigs were a lot fatter, for a lot of different reasons. Now they're pretty lean. But if it turns back around again and people want a different taste of pork, what do you do? How does your work impact that?
Yeah, so I would say that taste of pork is largely defined by its fat, right? So when you eat a steak, when you eat a pork chop, when you eat bacon, and you have that great flavor profile, it's not the protein, it's not the meat that gives you that sensation, that taste satisfaction. It's the fat that's contained within what you're consuming and what you're eating. So that's why on the beef side, they have different grades, right? You have prime, choice, select, standard, and that's all about the intramuscular fat, or the fat that's actually contained within the muscle. And pork's very similar, right? So we can change the taste profile or, your satisfaction with that pork chop or that bacon by the fat that they have within that certain cut of meat. And fat is highly reflective of what they consume.
Interesting stuff. What do you think is coming up? What kind of research are you working on that's really exciting that you think, wow, I wish more people could understand this and know about it?
We're kind of on the frontier of, understanding the bacteria population within the small intestine and within the entire GI tract of a pig and people as well, and how nutrition or the diet or what ingredients that pig or that we consume will impact or shift that bacteria population. So in your grocery aisles, you're walking through, kind of the medicine, the pharmacy area, you'll see prebiotics and probiotics. And as you watch, TV today, almost, every fifth commercial, it seems like, is for a prebiotic or a probiotic, right? So those same type of technologies we're researching on the pig side of how we can either feed a prebiotic or a probiotic, or how ingredients themselves will have prebiotic or probiotic properties that can then shift the bacteria population within the GI tract of pigs, and then either increase their livability, right? So mortality is their litter-bearing species, so it's something that we fight against every day, or B, improve their productivity and efficiency as well. So are they able to better utilize corn or distillers or soybean meal that we were talking about earlier more efficiently? That decreases our carbon footprint, increases our sustainability, and also is a little better on the checkbook. So that interaction between, I'll call it health, and especially the bacteria population of the GI tract of the pig, and nutrition, what we're doing every day, is kind of a frontier that we're working on, and something that has me really excited, just like we're doing on the human side as well.
Pig nutritionists are in demand. Dr. Laura Greiner trains a lot of them at Iowa State University. She wants students and everyone else to know how pig diets influence pig health and our environment. Dr. Greiner says pig nutrition is constantly evolving.
Oh, it's changed tremendously. I think most of us, if we've ever watched even The Wizard of Oz, for example, and we see them go out and they slop the pigs, meaning they're taking all of their scraps from their meals and they're giving them to the pigs. We don't do that anymore. In fact, we can't do that in many locations. And so what we do today is we feed our pigs very specialized diets that typically will contain corn and soybeans in them for protein and energy. And then we'll also put vitamins and minerals in those diets to make sure that they have enough for growth or reproduction or even milk production. And then we also look at other options. So for example, one that maybe our consumers can think about is bakery product. So Oreos, for example, that are made don't always come out the way we want them to come out. And so those products would get thrown into a landfill because they can't be used. It doesn't meet manufacturer specifications. But I, as a nutritionist for pigs, can actually feed that to pigs.
Wait, you can feed Oreos to pigs?
I can. Yeah. So we have information about those Oreos. We know how many calories are in those Oreos, and they work just like humans, right? Pigs and humans actually are very similar in their nutrition requirements and how they use different feed or food products, if you will. So we can take those Oreos, we know the energy, we crush them up, we grind them, and we can put them into the feed. We do the same thing for oatmeal, for donuts, for bread products, and we call this bakery product. But we can put a certain amount of that into the feed for our pigs, and then that keeps that out of the landfills. So not only are nutritionists today working towards creating a very healthy diet for our pigs, but we're also very environmentally conscious and trying to make sure that we are utilizing resources that may not be able to be used any other way. And that we're also making sure that what's coming out of the pig on the back end is not as much as what our environment can't handle. So basically, what we're trying to do is create good fertilizer for our crops and for our ground that we can use to replace some of our synthetic fertilizers, but do it in a way that's environmentally friendly.
Wow. So then what you're feeding the pig from the front, we always have heard plenty about the back. Okay.
Right.
But it can actually influence the type of manure and the quality of the manure based on what you feed them?
Absolutely.
Wow, that's so cool.
Yeah, it is awesome. And we do so much as far as the diets. We're constantly changing the pig's diet as it's growing to make sure that we stay right where their nutritional needs are so that we minimize what's going out the back end as we're putting it in the front.
Well, that's amazing because, you think of the ethanol plants, for example, and they feed the byproduct for cattle. But there is that sort of circular, sustainable kind of thing that can go on for not just cattle, but for pigs, right? And so like you said, the Oreos, but there's probably any number of things I haven't even thought of.
Oh, yes, absolutely. So we do the same thing. Pigs use dry distillers grains, just like our cattle do. So as we're making ethanol for humans in our vehicles, that byproduct, that leftover material can get fed to pigs. Pigs utilize that for growth to make protein, to make meat. And then they also then will remove some of it from their bodies in the terms of manure. And that goes back into the ground for fertilizer. And then that, of course, raises the corn that then creates the ethanol, and we create that cycle. We've seen a significant reduction in how much feed we provide those pigs. Not that we're putting them on a diet, but that we're creating a diet that's very intuitive to what that animal needs. And so we're using less land mass to grow that crop that we need to create that pig or to raise that pig. And so we've seen significant changes over the last 30 years in the way we raise pigs, and we continue to do that today.
So tell us, I know that there has been a lot of change when it comes to that sustainability. When people think of the good old days, the 70s, the 80s compared to today. But it's got to be markedly better from what they remember raising, say 1,000 pigs or something on pasture back in the days compared to today's modern hog barn. It's changed, right?
When we think about hog production today, what we actually see is that we're using 76% less land to raise pigs and 25% less water on an annual basis. And that's significantly different than what we saw back in the 1980s.
And a big part of that is the efficiency of the feed.
Correct.
It's like growing pigs faster with better foods.
Exactly. Better foods. We've got them inside in environmentally controlled areas so that they don't have to try to compete, right? When they're housed outside and we're thinking about winter, like we were just thinking about with these -4-degree weather patterns coming, they'd have to take all of that energy that they're using to eat and use it for heat. And that's, really what we see is that by moving them indoors now, we heat the barns, we keep them warm. So now all of that food that they're eating, they can use for growth rather than just survival.
So the old days, that's one more example of why the old days today is so much better.
Absolutely.
Well, where do you think is the cutting edge then? What's next for pig nutrition?
That's a great question. So when we think about the cutting edge for pig nutrition, what we're really focused on today is continually trying to improve that, what we call efficiency. So improve the pig's ability to take what we feed it and use all of that for growth or milk production or pregnancy and leave very little coming out the back end. We're continually creating diets that are healthier and also more environmentally friendly. So we're doing this through what we call enzymes. And so, enzymes exist, our body produces them. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to find these enzymes that we can feed. They naturally exist in the environment, but they can break down little pieces of fiber maybe that the pig can't necessarily use. But if we have the enzyme chop it up, if you will, then the pig can use it. And so then again, less fiber goes out into the manure. And so that is probably the biggest piece that we continue to work on from a dietary perspective is how do we allow that animal to use more and more ingredients that otherwise wouldn't be used, whether it's through humans or cattle or anywhere. We're trying to find a way to utilize those ingredients so that they don't end up in those landfills and also so that we can specialize in minimizing land use for manure application.
Well, that's wonderful. And it's good news for, environmentalists and farmers. And I say farmers are environmentalists and all of these other folks that are paying attention to that. And is that part of your ongoing research or what do you see is probably next?
Yes, that's a great question. So my ongoing research is a little bit twofold. One of it is sustainability or what we would call sustainability. So I mentioned this project that we're working on to fully understand the nutrient cycle of every ingredient we use in pigs. But I'm also working on some other projects where we're looking at nitrogen release and trying to minimize how much nitrogen is getting released from manure and trying to capture that back. So we are doing some more sustainability work. The other part of what I'm actually focused on is really on the sow, so on the mama, and not just when she's with her piglets, but as she's gestating, trying to work on some ways to improve joint health. And much like we think about humans and even our dogs and cats, we always talk about good joint health. And we want to do the same thing for our sows. And so that's something that I'm working on is how to improve her joint health and also to continue to look at her nutrient needs while she's nursing, because it's the one area that we don't really know a lot about that we continue to want to try to understand better.
It's a worthwhile pursuit, finding ways to reduce nitrogen from pig farming. And it's not just swine nutritionists who are studying ways to do that. Iowa farmers are too. Up next, the environmental footprint of pig farming. Or would you call it a hoof print? I'm Lori Johns. On your next Chop Talk, meet some groundbreaking Iowa pig farmers who can show us all how to go green in 2023. See you then.